Thanks for joining me for this next video tutorial covering still life. Today we're going to be shooting some dry noodles and grain type products. We're going to organize those in a specific manner to illustrate how you can utilize a wide focal length lens when shooting still life photography. So with that said, let's get started.
What we've done is actually pull together some different types of grain. And I wanted to do something a little different on this still life. I wanted to use an extremely wide angle lens. So I'm using a 12 to 24 millimeter lens, and as you can see how the camera is set up, it's very low and it's at a very steep angle. So what it's going to do is actually stretch this image. When we're actually seeing it through the camera, it's going to elongate it. So it's going to distort the image. What I wanted to do is give the feeling of looking into all of these different elements, these different textures, and so on and so forth. Now, I'm not using any kind of specialized lighting. All I'm simply doing is using the ambient light that's present here in this dining room, and it's light that's coming through windows. Okay, we're getting ready to start shooting this, and the first thing I want to talk about is depth of field. Now, since I'm working on a tripod, I can shoot at a very deep f-stop or f22. I'm going to shoot at the maximum so that I carry my depth of field from the extreme foreground to the extreme background. Now, the idea here is to make sure that all of these elements are in sharp focus. Now, understand that the angle of view that you're shooting at determines that depth of field range. Also, the focal length that you're using will determine that depth of field range from the extreme foreground to the extreme background. If I change my angle of view, my depth of field will actually lengthen or stretch out. In other words, it'll gain more depth of field from the foreground to the rear. I can move my camera back and my depth of field will actually extend also. So depending on the look and feel of the image that you're wanting to create will determine your point of view or your perspective, the focal length that you'll actually use, and the height of the perspective that you're shooting from. Obviously, when you're shooting something like this, you want to focus on the details. So maximum depth of field would most likely be required unless you're going after a different type of look and feel. Now, what I've done is I've actually extended my tripod and I've changed my angle of view where I'm almost looking down on the subject more than across the subject. What that's allowed me to do is elongate or stretch this image even more, but retain great depth of field from the foreground to the rear. In the last image that you looked at, that image depth of field was great right up in here, but what was happening is we weren't focusing deep enough into the image to be able to carry our depth of field from the foreground to the rear. So our back started actually falling off in depth of field. Understand, in still life photography, it's all about the elements that you're shooting. But depending on the look and feel that you want from your still life will determine the angle of view, the f-stop that you use, the exposure. So your perspective is very, very important because it's what actually tells the story of that particular still life. Now that you've had a chance to take a look at that image, we're going to do something a little different with this still life. Now, I'm not going to actually move any of these materials. What I'm going to simply do is rotate the actual set itself. Okay, and I'm going to put the spaghetti, if you will, in the front of our shot. So we're just going to turn everything around and we're going to refocus our camera. So we're going to come back down into here, and of course my materials are much further away from the camera, so I'm going to pull this in a little closer and just rearrange the image and get it exactly where I want it to be as far as our composition is concerned in the camera. And shoot. Now, if you'll notice, I haven't moved anything other than just change the angle of my camera. The tripod's basically stayed the same. Our product has actually moved closer to the camera. And remember, we're using a 12 millimeter to 24 millimeter wide angle. As you've seen in the pictures, it's extremely distorted. And that's what we want. We want that kind of feel from this. So I'm just going to mess with this composition until I get it exactly the way I want it. And then I'm going to shoot it. Now, if you'll notice, I'm using my self-timer. Because I'm using my tripod, I use that self-timer to alleviate any possible shake that there might be from me handling the camera. That's really important, especially when you're shooting things that are very delicate, or if there's wind and things of that nature. You always want to use your self-timer. Now, I want you to take a look at this next image, and as you're looking at this image, what I've done is I did not change anything about my camera. All I did was actually zoom in on the product itself and got much closer. So you can see the crop is still there. But here's the trick. When you're using a 12 to 24 millimeter lens, what you can do is, or a wide angle lens, what you can do is actually drop your camera down, move your product forward. You're still going to get that distortion from the product itself, but do a much tighter crop or much tighter shot on the subject itself. And that way you alleviate all the excess that's around the actual image and focus more on your still life itself. Now, pay attention to the lighting that we're using. This lighting is very, very simplistic. It's nothing more than window light, and you can get very creative with this. Any type of lighting would work for this. The whole point behind the still life is to illustrate a point of view or tell a story about the subject itself. Still life is nothing more than your imagination bringing certain elements together to create the image.
Still life photography is a lot of fun. It can be very, very simple or extremely complicated. It's all limited to your vision and your current ability. Learning the different techniques and lighting will help you grow your photography and increase the quality of your still life photography. Thanks for joining me for this video tutorial, and I look forward to our next.